Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. State Representative Dan Ugassi, 65th District, covering portions of Kane and McHenry County. I am joined today by my colleagues, Representative Mark Batnick of the 97th District, Avery Bourne of the 93rd District, and Noreen Hammond of the 95th District. Today I'm here to talk about the ongoing state of emergency in Illinois as so declared by the governor, the overreach of executive power, and the protection of our representative democracy. Emergency is defined in the dictionary as an unforeseen combination of circumstances or resulting state that calls for immediate action. It's also defined as an urgent need for assistance or relief. For the last 20 months, we have had one person rule our state, operating under a continual emergency declaration. In fact, to date, he's made 91 such orders. That's 91 times that constituents, business owners, and families, and the entire legislative body have been silenced. The governor has relied on what has been deemed ambiguous legislation or an ambiguous section of the Illinois Emergency Management Act to issue continuous emergency declarations and exercise authority he otherwise would not possess. I have filed legislation to address this problem. It would ensure the legislature is involved in determining how our state is run. My House Bill 843 would guarantee executive power is kept in check and that the legislature is not denied its role in governing the state. It's important that as members of the legislature, we are able to act on the concerns of the people in our district, in governing at all times, and only in the most extreme circumstances should the executive authority be allowed to, or the executive be allowed to act alone. As lawmakers, we have a job to do, and that is to be the voice for our constituents so that they believe that their views are represented. How the current health situation has been handled is not how our system of government was intended to operate, nor as our system of checks and balances has been meant to function. By the continual rule of executive order, the people have had no voice. Ladies and gentlemen, our citizens have gone to war so that the people could have a voice. Good men and women have died. Our own state government should not ignore this fact. I have made several public and private requests for this bill to be heard. In fact, this goes back to the spring of 2020 when I first started asking our legislative leaders to bring us back so we could address this situation, this health care crisis, with the governor and have input as into how the state would address it. It was ignored. It's also not the first time I filed a bill on this issue. House Bill 5790 was filed in the 101st General Assembly, and it would have put, just like this bill, an immediate end to continuing declarations of emergency power for the same emergency beyond 30 days. We need legislative input in these matters, and yet it was not allowed a hearing. Despite my best efforts, the Democrats have still not signed on to this and have not allowed me a hearing. These actions, or the lack of actions as the case may be, that of the governor and the majority party has denied a co-equal branch of government and the people their voice to be heard in this state. I ask, what is it going to take before they join me in protecting our system of government? Now I'd like to turn it over to Representative Mark Batnick.
Thank you, Dan. Mark Batnick, 97th District, Plainfield area. I wanted to start by just giving everyone a little bit of an idea of where I've come from on this entire issue. 2 weeks ago, actually 2 weeks ago, just about right this moment, I did a radio show. I decided to buy radio time to talk about some more of the nuances of the issues facing us, COVID and many other things. And I bought a radio show to talk about the importance of vaccinating people who are pregnant, which I can tell you was kind of shocking for the base to hear. But I tell that story just to let you know that in terms of following science and data and what's important, no matter where that leads us, I think that's where we need to go, and we need to do it in an open matter. I'd like to anonymously quote one of my Democratic colleagues who said, you know, we may all come to the same conclusion, but we need to do this publicly and transparently, and clearly we haven't done that yet. So we're not here today to call for any very specific changes to any way we've gone down this path. We just want to do it publicly, the path that we choose on a moving forward basis. And it's really a process argument. We can't accept a process simply because we like an outcome. You know, that outcome might change. You look at other states. I don't think the governor should have the authority to do nearly 2 years of 30-day emergency orders and do all these rules and mandates any more than I think Governor DeSantis in Florida should be doing, you know, mandates saying that you can't add the layer of protection of masks at the local level, right? That's not the way it's meant to be done. We're meant to have a legislative input for a reason. You know, it's also a matter of trust a little bit. I think you're seeing a lack of trust in government. I think it's pretty fair to say there's a big lack of trust from many in our many of our citizens because of the lack of transparency. You know, you have elected officials that maybe take statistics and data out of context pretty significantly. And if we were to have a more open and transparent process, I think you'd probably have more compliance with what we're doing and more trust. And in my most recent letter to the governor, in my original discussions with the governor, I always said we need to have public buy-in. The things need to make sense to people. And right now I feel like we're losing the public buy-in on the pandemic and how to move forward. And I just want to highlight a couple of reasons why the discussion is important to do it publicly. My wife is an SRT, which is a student resource teacher, which is special ed. She's basically middle management at a school for special ed, K through 5. And, you know, she was just telling me a situation of an autistic kid that may not be able to stay in school because having trouble with wearing the mask. I'm not sure that's in the best interest of our society for that kid to have to comply with a mask mandate that they're having a really hard time complying with. There's nuances to this. The World Health Organization looks at it differently than the CDC looks at it. When you go back in time to when we closed schools, I think many of us are going to look back and say that might not have been the right decision to have so many schools closed. There's a huge difference in life expectancy based on income. If you Google this, you'll find out that the highest 1% and lowest 1%, there's about a 10-year life expectancy difference for women, 15-year life expectancy difference for men based on income gap. The kids that didn't have the ability to stay in school, especially the ones that don't have two-parent homes, middle income, access to tutors, all that, you're going to see long-term effects on their income, which affects their life expectancy, which ultimately is what this is supposed to be about. So I get a little tired about listening to the experts when we're not having a situation when we're listening to all the experts. We're not listening to special ed teachers. We're not listening to sociologists talk about income gaps. We're not listening to people to talk about potential increase in violence. I know in our local school districts, we're just having a lot of difficulty with the kids being in control because they've been out of school so long. So there's a lot of nuance to this. There's a lot of public debate that needs to be happening that isn't happening. And probably one of the biggest issues that I get asked in my district office is about a mandate for kids to go to school, vaccine mandate for kids to go to school. And I'm not here to answer whether or not we should be doing that or not. But my question to you that I'd like to see asked of the governor is, does the governor think he has the authority to mandate a vaccine for school kids without public input, without the legislature? And I haven't seen anybody ask that question. That's what this is really all about. We're looking to be a co-equal branch of government and manage this best we can, because I think we can bring a lot of different viewpoints to the table. Once again, it needs to be done publicly and transparently. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Avery Bourne.
Thank you, Mark. Avery Bourne, State Representative of the 95th Legislative District. I represent Christian, Montgomery, Macoupin, and Madison counties. Today we're up here to talk about an issue that I think we all hear about from our constituents, but also I hope that the Democrats in the legislature are hearing from their constituents as well, which is reining in the executive authority of Governor Pritzker. Oh, and by the way, also every future governor. This is an issue of good government. So we're here today to obviously push for Representative Ugasty's House Bill 843, but also to talk about the failures of the House and Senate Democrats in holding the governor accountable over the last 20 months. Every time that we bring this up and we say we need to pass a bill like this, which will rein in the current and future governors, they bring up what they call the Restore Illinois Collaborative Commission, which they made with bipartisan lawmakers that was supposed to work in tandem with the governor throughout his pandemic response. We have yet to see any kind of teeth to that commission. They haven't introduced legislation. They haven't held any hearings in person. They haven't come up with any real restraints on the governor's authority, and we haven't seen any real reports from them, which is one of the reasons we oppose the continuation of that commission. We don't need a Restore Illinois Collaborative Commission. We need to restore a co-equal branch of government's authority, which is the legislature. We are having in-person hearings today. I just came from one and came from another one. We can do this as a legislature to hold the governor's staff accountable, the agencies. We've had issues, everything from, of course, IDES and unemployment to ISP and FOID, right? We have seen many, many agencies that need to be held accountable along with the governor's continually issuing these executive orders. This bill is a small step to rein in the executive authority of Governor Pritzker. This is a super common sense thing. We could go even further and ask for even more audits and hearings. This is a first step that makes a lot of sense. I'm hopeful we can find a bipartisan group to support it because they are certainly hearing it from their constituents just as we all are hearing it from our constituents. Their vote for us was to be lawmakers. They did not vote for Governor Pritzker to run this state by executive order. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. It's a really important first step, and I'm hopeful that as we are here in the legislature for the next 2 weeks, we're able to talk about reining in the governor's executive authority. With that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Noreen Hammond.
Thank you, Avery. I'm Noreen Hammond. I represent the 93rd District. All are part of 8 counties in west central Illinois. And as elected members, as we stand here before you as elected members of the Illinois General Assembly, together with all of our colleagues, we are responsible for representing our constituents and voting on policy matters that are important to them. And that includes the state's COVID-19 response. Governor Pritzker has issued an extended disaster declaration since the beginning of this pandemic with little to no input from legislators. The governor has issued a total of 91 executive orders. This represents the condensed version of those 91 executive orders since 2020 and 2021. Everything from the initial stay-at-home to regional mitigations and masks and vaccine mandates. The Democratic majority in the General Assembly has abdicated the responsibility to serve as a co-equal branch of our government and has ceded that authority to Governor Pritzker again and again. I'm here today to assert that the General Assembly's authority and responsibility to debate and enact critically important legislation during these times is now. And it has passed, and we continue it today, but now is the time to act and right the wrongs that have been done to this point. We have to have an open and honest discussion, as my colleagues have said, about what we've done with this COVID response and any further mitigations or restrictions. That would begin by calling Representative Ugasty's House Bill 843 for a vote by all 118 members in the House. Thank you for your time. We'll take questions.
Well, in World War II, which lasted more than 2 years, you know, there was shared sacrifice. We saved our grease. We couldn't buy a new car because the factories were given over to that effort, etc. What's the difference between that emergency and the one that you guys are talking about?
The legislature was still meeting during that time, right?
You guys aren't going to be here tomorrow, apparently. The Senate's also canceling. What signal does that send with your outstanding issues here?
The signal that that sends to me, and I think to many of us, is that the governor wants to continue doing what he's doing, and many of our members are not willing to stand up and say, wait a minute, we need to stay here, we have things we need to do.
Why does the legislature know more about this than the governor?
No. Make no mistake. I don't think any of us are saying that we know more than the governor. That's not the point here. The point here is that we are elected officials, and we should serve as a co-equal branch of government to address this situation.
But just to add on to that, as the representatives, we are closest to the people. Almost 13 million people cannot reach the governor's office to have their voice heard. They contact our offices and the senator's offices to make certain their views are known and that their voices are heard in this state. And that's what we're looking to do, just represent their voices. This is a democracy. It is supposed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people, not by one person.
And when it comes to Democrat leadership, I know you said you reached out to have the bill heard. I've asked Democratic leadership similar questions, and they say they support the governor. But there are a few Democrats that are uneasy about the governor's continued unilateral orders. Have you heard from any of those in the rank and file, or have you reached out to any of the rank and file, and if so, who?
So I have reached out, and I will just tell you, to the person, the response I get is, I will look at it and get back to you. And despite the fact that I brought it up at least 3 times and now on the floor and have now had a press conference, and I'll let you know if the answer ever changes. But as of right now, that's the only response I get.
Co-equal branch, I'm sorry.
Let me just finish this question. I think the reason they're going as it is because it's dangerous politically to take votes and take stands. So I think they're looking at the politics of it instead of the policy of it, would be just my viewpoint of what I think is happening here, right? So it's a lot easier to be on both sides of the coin if you don't have to put your, hit your button and put something on the board.
Well, co-equal branch of government, I understand that, 118 and 59, I understand that. Well, why not go the other way? Have a statewide referendum on some of this stuff. Really, let we, the people, decide. Not you guys. Me.
Well, I filed a bill multiple times about allowing more citizens' input via referendum, so we would have to call that bill first. So that would be a constitutional issue. But this is an issue. An issue like this is obviously difficult for people who are busy with their families and busy with their lives. An issue like this is really made for public hearings in the General Assembly to call in the experts. There's a lot of nuance on this. I'm going to talk about one of the nuances I have even within my own caucus. I'm fearful of when you try to push too much to the school board, they're not equipped to answer all the questions on this. There's scientific issues, there's social issues, they're not experts on all these things. And I have big school districts by me. I don't think they're equipped. I can't even imagine some of the small districts in some of the rural areas. So you need to be public and transparent about it, but you also need to have the resources and the ability to do it, which is why we should do it. Public hearings on this, on bringing in a whole host of viewpoints on a whole host of issues, would be incredibly, incredibly helpful. Understanding. I'll just go back to schools being closed for so long. Understanding, my wife talks incessantly about how the first graders and the kindergartners are just so far behind from where they were in the past. And what's the ripple effect of that long term? That has negative consequences that haven't been talked about. I really haven't heard, maybe he has, I haven't heard the governor talk about it, right? But those are the sorts of things that we can do through public hearings at the state level where we can bring our stories, like Representative Ugasti had said, from around the state and have a public hearing on it and really kind of vet this stuff out.
Well, at the
You say
Springfield School
some
Board the other
some
night,
school districts aren't able to handle this. Others feel that they are, and they're actually taking the governor, or is being to court.
Yeah,
Parents are taking them to court as well. The governor says that's irresponsible.
Yeah, Avery's got something for you there.
So I would say on this issue, it's really a shame that these local governments are having to go to court to get clarity. If we as the legislature pass laws with clear guidance, they would know what they're supposed to be doing rather than spending taxpayer dollars to go to court to try to get clarity. This is as Representative Hammond said, a complete abdication by the majority in the legislature in order to not give clear guidance to schools, in order to not give them the information that they need. I serve on all of the education committees. We've yet to have a single hearing on this. We have asked and we have asked and we have asked to have a hearing on schools being open, to have hearings on school responses, on school guidance, and we've heard nothing. That is an abdication of our responsibility, and that's a total disservice to every single school district, big school districts, small school districts. It's creating a divide between the school boards and the parents because they're not, the school boards feel like they have to uphold the governor's order. They're not given clear guidance. They want to represent their parents. This being done only by the governor is doing a disservice to every parent, every student, every teacher, every school board member. They should get very clear guidance and hearings from the legislature.
Well, the school board in Springfield the other night, some folks were saying, this is Nazism. This is Jim Crow, and it's a slippery slope, etc. You guys, the school board, don't deserve to have your jobs, and the vaccine is just a fraud meant to prop up Big Pharma. I mean, do those opinions belong in this great debate? And by the way, maybe they're right. Maybe they're all right.
Yeah, I want to hit this. You know, so this is the trust issue that we talked about and the lack of trust. So I see a lot of you can Google it. A lot of people pushing that 99% of the people that are dying from COVID are the unvaccinated. Right? These are former elected officials. I saw a tweet the other day. Oregon does a really nice job of breaking down COVID more than we do. They do a couple of decent things that are different things. They actually break down vaccine breakthrough deaths and COVID breakthrough deaths. Now, it's not 1% recently. It was 19.3% in September. It was 23.2%. In August, it was 19.8%. Massachusetts recently reported 45 deaths from breakthrough cases, okay? If 1% of the deaths were breakthrough cases, that would have meant in that particular week 4,500 people died in Massachusetts. It's not true. So you have people that are pushing data out there that gives people not a reason to not trust government because they're being told things that are either wildly taken out of context or completely untrue because of the lack of a transparent process. Had we had a transparent process that talked about the nuances, that talked about, you had a school in Chicago that there were 3 cases in the entire school. They closed the entire school for 2 weeks. The people that were allowed to stay were only the vaccinated kids, and the kids that had previous infections weren't allowed to stay. Well, the Israeli data shows us that previous infection is probably stronger than the vaccine. So if you're following the science, I don't know why those kids were denied the right to go to school too. So you have all these things that people can hang on to, that they can extrapolate and run in a different direction. If we were being more democratic, more American, I don't think you would have the kind of pushback like that you had. I think that is a symptom of the problem of us not meeting and doing things transparently.
So to what extent is you say the General Assembly's been sidelined, but to what extent is it just a sort of tacit approval for the existing laws that allow the governor to do this?
Anyone can add on. I would just say this. Tacit approval is not appropriate in this situation. That does not allow for public hearing and debate that the people of the state get to see and hear and know that their viewpoints being considered and heard by the people making decisions. It's still just allowing one person to rule and not allowing the people to have their voice heard and have the information being brought before everyone and making certain those who are making the decisions are aware, in fact, of all the information. So that's the problem with just doing it that way.
And with that, we see the guideposts have moved, the goalposts have moved all throughout this. You know, the governor's still not able to tell us what number is going to let the masks come off.
Yeah, my letter just asked for metrics. The letter I had, my most recent letter, I was like, you know what, it gives buy-in, it gives people a goal. I think the most recent thing was, maybe by the holidays. It probably should be a goal deadline, not a date deadline, right, or a metrics deadline. Even if it's like, hey, this is what here's where we are now, right? Things obviously could change if the data changes, but if we get below this whether it be positivity rate, case rate, hospitalization rate, or a blend of everything, it's always better in situations for there to be a hard and fast goal for people to realize what they have to achieve. Otherwise, they feel like it's just a never-ending train of rules.
Every time we asked the governor about this last year and this year, he said lawmakers could come back, they could come to session. I'm not holding them back. Clearly, both leaders didn't want to bring you back, and it doesn't seem that that's going to happen because we're back here right now, and guess what? You guys are going home tomorrow. So every time we come in, it's like, who cares? Just go home. What's the point if nothing is done?
And again, I think it goes to what Representative Batnick said just a bit ago, that many of our colleagues, unfortunately, are not willing to take a stand politically. So I think that that's what's holding it back. As you know, there is a super majority in the House and the Senate, and so somebody with some stature has to stand up and say, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to meet, and we're going to talk about it.
Also, that's such a non-answer from the governor. He has the authority to call us back to special session. He could do it in a heartbeat. He could bring us all back and say, I want you to pass laws that allow for this COVID response. He could do that for anything. He could say, come down and pass a law to fix the IDES backlog. Come back, fix ISP's backlog. He could do that. But additionally, that's why this bill is so important. Because for 20 months, they keep saying, oh, the legislature could do it, or, oh, we think the governor's doing a fine job. This requires it. This requires, after 30 days of an emergency, the legislature has to do an up or down vote, some kind of plan moving forward that allows for public buy-in, that gives people a sense of where we're going. Because 30 days of an emergency, fine. But after 30 days, and then every 30 days thereafter, there needs to be accountability so that there isn't this response from the governor of like, well, they could do it, and then the legislature saying, well, the governor could do it. There's a firm date in law that says this is what will happen.
You may remember that an outspoken lawmaker had lawsuits.
You're saying there's not political will to do these things? Finish this first, real quick.
You may remember that an outspoken lawmaker had several lawsuits against the governor over the same exact thing. Are you all aligning yourself with what the original argument was with Darren Bailey? Or is this just seeing that it's been extended so many times, this needs to stop?
I think this is an outcry from our constituents that there needs to be a constraint on the executive authority of the governor. It's apparently not clear enough in statute, so this makes it crystal clear.
One more, Billy, let's wrap it up. Well, if you wanted to respond to that.
Just quickly, the reason I filed the bill is I was hearing from my constituents, and not only were they saying, here's what we think and what we want you to do for us, but why aren't you doing anything? And if I can't be heard, if I can't have input into the situation, I looked around and I saw what the other states around us are doing, and similarly situated states. I didn't look at every state, but I did a survey of their laws and saw that almost all of them in this area, you have to go back to the legislature to continue an emergency order. It's not just automatic. The executive gets to declare an emergency still exists. Therefore, I'm going to continue to act alone.
Yeah, let me add a real brief to that. I think there's a difference between, and I honestly don't have every lawsuit memorized, but I think there's a difference between what I believe those were about, which was flipping some of the rules, versus we may all, I'm going to quote a dem legislator again, anonymously, we may all come to the same conclusions, we just want to do it publicly and transparently. So along the way, we may have come to very similar conclusions to what the governor has done at times, but we just want to do it openly, publicly, and transparently with more input.
So you've said a couple of times there might not be political will to take on these tough issues, but I mean, we've seen some pretty large, complex, tough issues in the past year and a half. The criminal justice police regulation bill, the energy bill, I mean, these are massive, massive undertakings. Is it really just a lack of political will, or what do you think is really behind this? Behind the lack of action from the legislature?
I think the agenda of the folks on the other side of the aisle from us has been marching this state further and further to the left and becoming more and more progressive, and doing something to hold their governor, the head of their party, accountable is not something that they're interested in. I think that you've seen their priority is making our laws more progressive, more liberal, rather than actually standing up and saying this is the role of the legislature and we're going to stand up to the governor.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.